She was 22 years old, and she had $10 and a car that needed an oil change when she raised her hand at a county tax auction on a Saturday morning in April. And nobody bid against her. The building was a Stagecoach inn built in 1857 on what had once been the main freight and passenger route through the mountain foothills outside Garnet Fork. 3 stories of hand-hewn timber and fieldstone with a front porch sagging at the center and every second-floor window boarded with warped plywood. It had operated as an inn, then a boarding house, then a storage facility, and then nothing at all for 19 years. The county's opening bid was $10. Ada Price paid it. She also owed $640 in delinquent property taxes before the deed would transfer, which she earned over 14 days of double shifts at a Route 7 diner while sleeping in her car in the parking lot. When she finally drove up the gravel track into Garnet Fork and put the key in the door for the first time, what she found in the root cellar beneath the old kitchen would eventually be reported in 3 county newspapers and a national feature wire, and would change every single thing about what came next. Before we go any further, if you're finding a quiet moment for this one, I hope you'll stay. Hitting subscribe keeps these stories coming to you, and it only takes a second. Drop something in the comments too. I always want to know where people are watching from. Now, back to Ada. Ada Price had known since she was 16 that she wanted to run a place. Not a resort, not a chain property, just a place somewhere travelers came in tired and left feeling like they had been genuinely looked after. She had grown up watching her mother work double shifts at a regional motel, and she had understood from that, watching 2 separate things at once, that the business itself had not been kind to her mother, and that her mother had nonetheless found a way to be kind within it. Her mother could read what a guest needed in the first 30 seconds and provide it without making them feel examined. Ada had inherited this. She could walk into a room full of people and know within a few minutes who was struggling and what would actually help, and what would only look like help. She had put herself through a 2-year associate's degree in hospitality management at the community college, waitressing nights and weekends, living in the cheapest off-campus room she could find, graduating at 20, with no debt and no savings, and a credential she fully intended to use. She kept a notebook from her first semester onward. In it, she wrote down everything she learned about running a small property, room ratios, breakfast costs per head, what amenities actually moved the needle for guests on a budget versus guests who were not. She wrote down properties she researched online, decommissioned inns, tax-delinquent hotels, the occasional rural building that went to auction for almost nothing. She did not have the money to act on any of it. She kept the notebook anyway. She had been with Seth Sellers for 2 years when she moved into his family's farmhouse, 20 minutes outside Garnet Fork. The arrangement made sense financially. She was waitressing and looking for management work and trying to save anything at all, and Seth had offered, and she had been careful about it. She pulled her weight. She cooked most nights, cleaned without being asked, contributed to groceries out of her own wages, made herself as unobtrusive as possible. She kept her things contained to the 2 rooms Seth used and made a point of never being underfoot. She had grown up understanding how to occupy borrowed space without drawing attention to the fact of her presence in it. The notebook went with her from room to room. She added to it in the evenings, new properties she had found, updated research on what B&B margins look like in mountain counties, notes she had taken from interviews and case studies in trade publications she read at the library on her days off. She knew that a notebook was not a plan, not really, and that a plan without capital was not much more. But she kept it because it kept her oriented, because it reminded her, on the evenings when the farmhouse felt like a place she was merely passing through, that she was passing through towards something specific. She had understood from the first week that Seth's mother, Nadine, was not enthusiastic about her presence. Nadine was not unkind in any way you could point to. She was cordial in the manner of someone managing an inconvenience, always slightly ahead of whatever conversation Ada started, always framing her observations in the form of encouragement that somehow landed as doubt. There had been an interview. A junior management position with a regional hotel group, exactly the kind of role Ada needed to build toward the thing she actually wanted. She had prepared thoroughly, had her portfolio in order, was confident. She had mentioned the interview at dinner, and Nadine had said she knew someone there, that she would put in a good word. Ada had thanked her and felt, for a moment, that she had misjudged the situation. She did not get the job. She did not get a call back. She called twice and heard nothing. She learned what had happened 8 months later, from someone who worked in the hotel's administrative office, and mentioned it in passing in the way that people sometimes do when they do not know they are delivering important news. A woman matching Nadine's description had called the hotel before the interview. She had offered herself as a character reference. She had told them, among other things, that the candidate was a sweet girl, but had significant difficulty with conflict and, she thought, limited long-term potential in a hospitality leadership role. Ada sat with this information for a long time before she did anything with it. She filed it alongside other things she had learned about Nadine and decided to be more careful. She stayed because she did not have somewhere else to go, and because Seth was not unkind, and because she was still building toward something and needed time. Seth was not a complicated man. He was warm and easy, and had, she understood eventually, never been asked to make a difficult choice in his life, and had never developed the muscle for it. He came to her in March with the expression of someone delivering something he has rehearsed, and he said, carefully, that he didn't think this was working, that he hoped she knew he cared about her, that he was sorry. Ada had seen it coming for 2 months. She thanked him, which surprised him, and went upstairs to start packing. She was on her second box when she looked out the window. Her things were already on the porch. Nadine had moved through the house while Seth was in the kitchen, quickly, efficiently, with the decisiveness of someone who had been waiting for this moment. The boxes were not packed with care. Ada's clothes were folded in some and shoved in others. On top of the last box, when she brought it to the car, she found the ceramic mug her mother had given her. A blue mug with a worn rim, the last thing she had from her mother, in 3 pieces at the bottom, broken because it had been put in without wrapping, and the box had been set down hard. There was no apology with the boxes. No note. Just the rain that had started while Nadine was packing, making the cardboard soft. Ada loaded what she could. She did not say anything to Nadine. She was not certain she could. She drove for an hour without a direction and then pulled into a gas station and sat in her car with the windows up and thought about what she had. $10. A car with 160,000 miles. Her hospitality credential. Her waitressing job at the Route 7 diner, which she still had. The clothes in the back seat. The notebook. She had the notebook. She had $10. She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook and opened it, not to write anything, just to hold it. Then she opened her phone. She had been checking the county surplus site on and off for a year and a half. She opened it in the gas station parking lot at 11:30 at night with the rain on the windshield, and she scrolled through the current listings, and she found it. Stagecoach Inn, Garnet Fork. Built 1857. 3 stories. Fieldstone and timber construction, 1.3 acres. Delinquent taxes of $640. Minimum opening bid, $10. 6 weeks on the listing, no bids. 14 photographs. She looked at each photograph 3 times. The porch sagged, and the plywood was warped, and the roof had a section she could not evaluate from the angle of the photograph. But the fieldstone foundation was visible in 3 pictures, and it was solid. She could read that even through a phone screen. The timber framing exposed in one interior shot was old growth, the grain tight, the kind of wood that does not fail. The floors were buried in debris, but she could see, in the corners of the photographs, that they were wide plank and original. She had spent 2 years learning to read properties on paper. She read this one for a long time. She set her alarm for 6. She paid the $10 by check. Her checking account held that amount and $2 additional, and the county clerk gave her a form and told her she had 30 days to clear the back taxes, or the deed would revert. $640. Ada drove directly to Route 7 and asked her manager Carla for every shift available. Carla looked at her once and said, "You need a place to stay?" Ada said she had the car for now. Carla put down her pen and went to the back and came out with a key to the break room couch, which she set on the counter and did not discuss further. Ada worked 14 days without a day off, sleeping on the break room couch, eating the diner's shift meals, putting every dollar into an envelope she kept in her glove compartment. On the 15th morning, she drove to the county clerk's office and paid the taxes. She drove to Garnet Fork on a Thursday afternoon in May with the deed in her glove compartment and a box of cleaning supplies in the back seat and $22 remaining in her wallet. The road into town ran through a narrow valley between 2 ridgelines green with early spring, and she could see the inn from a quarter-mile out, 3 stories rising over the tree line, the long porch, the for sale by county sign still leaning against the rail. She sat in the car and looked at it for a while. The front door had swollen in its frame and took her shoulder to open. The air inside was cold and still, the smell of an enclosed space left too long without anyone in it. She let her eyes adjust. The entrance hall was wide enough for travelers arriving with trunks and cases and the accumulated gear of long journeys. She walked it slowly, testing the floor. The planks were solid underfoot, dry and stable. The staircase to the 2nd floor was intact, the balusters all present, each tread firm when she put her weight on it. She went up slowly, running her hand along the railing, feeling for looseness in the joints. There was none. Whoever had built this had overbuilt it in the way of people who expected a thing to last 100 years and were correct about it. The 2nd floor held 5 rooms, each with a window that would need reglazing once the plywood came down, walls cracked where the plaster had shifted over decades but not compromised in any structural sense. She ran her hand along each wall, pressing lightly, feeling for movement or hollow spots. The plaster held. At the end of the hall, a narrow stair led to the 3rd floor, one long room that ran the full width of the building, with hooks mounted along both walls and 3 low windows on each side. The dormitory, where travelers slept communally when the private rooms were full, or when they could not afford the price of one. She stood in the center of it and looked at the hooks in the windows and felt the particular weight of a room that has held a great many people's exhaustion. Then she went back down to the kitchen. A recessed iron ring, flush with the floor. A trapdoor. She crouched and pulled. The door came up with resistance, and then all at once, and a smell rose from below, cool, earthy, and something else beneath it. Something dry and faintly sweet, like old wood, and something else she could not name. She got her flashlight from the cleaning kit and aimed it down. Stone stairs. 8 of them, descending into a root cellar cut directly from the hillside rock. The inn had been built into the slope, she saw. The cellar had 3 stone walls and a stone ceiling, with natural earth insulation on all sides. The temperature down there would be stable year-round. Cool, dark, and still. Against the far wall was a wooden rack. She could not quite make out what was on it from the top of the stairs. She went down. I want to stop here just for a moment, because what she found on that rack is the part I think you'll want to stay for. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly when to do it. It keeps these stories coming. 1 second to hit it and leave something in the comments. I read every one. Now, what was on the rack? The rack was floor to ceiling, hand-built, mortise and tenon joints, 6 shelves wide. 30-odd years of dust on the surfaces, but the rack itself was sound. Nothing to fail, nothing to loosen. On the shelves, bottles. She counted 24, each one wrapped individually in a square of burlap and laid on its side in the way you store wine. The weight distributed evenly, the seal protected. She lifted the nearest one and held her flashlight behind the glass. Dark amber. The bottle was sealed with a wax-covered cork, completely intact. Whatever paper label had been there was long gone, but the glass itself was old in the particular way of pre-industrial manufacture, slightly thicker than modern glass, not entirely uniform, each bottle subtly individual. She turned it slowly in the light. On the bottom shelf, pushed to the back, was a tin box. She set the bottle down and pulled the box out and opened it on the earthen floor of the cellar. Inside, a bundle of papers folded and tied with a strip of cotton that crumbled when she touched it. A small leather-covered notebook. And on top, a single sheet in a woman's hand, small, precise letters, closely formed, the pen pressure consistent and deliberate. She carried everything up the stairs. She sat on the kitchen floor in the thin afternoon light from the dirty windows, and she read. The letter was dated November 14th, 1918. It was signed Harriet Vance. Harriet had run the Garnet Fork Inn from 1882 until her death, which, Ada understood from the date, must have come very shortly after the letter was written, in the influenza season that swept through the mountain counties that winter. She had not inherited the inn or married into it. She had bought it herself at 31, she wrote, with 10 years of savings earned as a hotel housekeeper in 4 different cities. The inn had been failing when she bought it. She wrote, without any drama about this, it was failing because it had been badly managed, which was a solvable problem, and she solved it. She wrote about the bottles. She had begun acquiring them in 1912, she explained, from 3 distilleries she had long done business with. Aged rye whiskey and bourbon, selected and stored properly, sealed against time. Her intention had been to open them in 1957, at the inn's centennial, assuming the inn was still standing and still run by someone who understood what they had. She did not know, in November of 1918, whether either of those things would be true. She was writing because she thought she might not have much time left, and she wanted the record to be clear. She wrote about the guests she had served over 36 years. She wrote about the cold shelf she had maintained in the root cellar. Always something on it, available to any traveler who came in without money, without being asked whether they could pay. She had kept this through lean years and good ones. It had cost her, over time, a measurable amount. She had never considered not doing it. She wrote at the bottom, in slightly larger letters than the rest of the page, as though she wanted to make sure whoever read it could not miss it. The inn is only as good as its welcome. I have tried to keep that true. I hope you will too. Ada held the letter for a long time. The town historian was a woman named Dorothea Marsh, who went by Dot, and who operated from a back room at the Garnet Fork Public Library, with the focused intensity of someone who has been storing up a lifetime of local knowledge and is waiting for someone to ask. She drove up to the inn 2 days after Ada called the library's main number, walked through every room at the pace of a woman who has been wanting to do this for years, and descended into the root cellar with Ada's flashlight and stood in front of the rack for a long time without speaking. She ordered from 3 distilleries, Dot said finally. Dot had been studying Harriet Vance for 30 years, and over the days that followed she produced, from memory and from the county archive, a picture of a woman who had known exactly what she was doing from the moment she arrived. Harriet had inherited nothing and been given nothing. She had saved for 10 years as a hotel housekeeper, learning the business from the inside, and had purchased the Garnet Fork property at a moment when every practical person she knew told her it was a mistake. She had proved them wrong by being more competent than they had anticipated, which was, Dot said, a thing Harriet had apparently been accustomed to. "There's a letter in the county archive from 1903, Dot said one afternoon, sitting in the kitchen with Ada while Ada worked. Written by the circuit judge to his wife, mentioning a stop at the inn. He wrote that it was the best managed property on the mountain route, better than anything in town, and that the proprietress ran it with, he used the phrase, military precision. He meant it as a compliment." She paused. Harriet ran a tight house, but she never once, not in 36 years of records I can find, turned away a person who came to the door hungry. Not once. She always said the inn is only as good as its welcome, Dot added. That phrase shows up in 3 different letters written about her by guests. It was something she said often enough that people remembered it and wrote it down. I know because I found the purchase records at the county clerk's archive years ago, when I was documenting the inn's commercial history. I never knew what had become of the order. She looked at the row of burlap-wrapped bottles with an expression Ada recognized as the look of a hypothesis confirmed. Pre-Prohibition American spirits stored in stable conditions for over a century. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you know what these are worth?" Ada did not know. She spent the next week finding out. She reached a spirits authentication specialist through a university extension agriculture program, a methodical man named Calloway who arrived from the state capitol with a colleague, 2 cameras, and a case of reference materials, and spent 4 hours in the cellar and the kitchen, photographing each bottle, documenting the glass manufacture style, testing the seal integrity on each one, cross-referencing the bottle profiles against authenticated pre-Prohibition production records from the 3 distilleries Harriet had named in her letter. He did not comment on what he found while he found it. He was the kind of specialist who had learned that showing his hand changes the room. He called 2 weeks later. 22 of the 24 bottles were authenticated, 17 rye whiskeys and 5 bourbons, all estimated to have been bottled between 1905 and 1914. 2 bottles had compromised seals and were not viable. He recommended she contact a specialist auction house with an established spirits division. He gave her a range for what the authenticated lot might bring, stated with the care of a man who did not want to be held to the optimistic end of it. She called a specialist auction house the following morning. She drove the bottles to the auction house herself in October, each one wrapped in the original burlap and nested in insulated foam in a cooler on the back seat. She was not willing to trust this to a courier. She sat in the back row of the auction room for 2 days, watching the bidding, keeping her expression neutral in the way she had learned to keep expressions neutral in rooms where other people were deciding things. The lot sold for $81,000. She drove home through the mountain valley in the dark with the windows down, listening to the sound of the ridge. She thought about Harriet Vance, who had put those bottles in a cellar in 1912 for an occasion she would not live to see, who had written a letter to no one in particular, who had trusted that the right person would come. She thought about the cold shelf and the guests who arrived with nothing and left in spring with something. She thought about the inn is only as good as its welcome, and what it meant to have that sentence handed to you by someone who had proved it over 36 years. Dot introduced her to everyone who mattered, in the deliberate way of a town historian who has been waiting for someone worth introducing people to. Lou Garrett at the hardware store had assessed the building twice before for owners who never followed through, and he showed up the second Saturday after Ada's return from the auction with a truck full of roofing materials, and a manner that said he had decided this time was going to be different. A woman named Sylvie, who had grown up in Garnet Fork and retired back to it, began coming on Wednesdays and brought with her an extensive working knowledge of Victorian plasterwork that Ada found invaluable. An older couple who ran the gas station on the far end of Main Street began leaving a bag of produce on the inn's back step every Friday, without explanation, which Ada accepted in the spirit it was offered. The building taught her things that her coursework had not. Each room had a logic to it, a reason for its dimensions and its windows and its placement in relation to the others, and she learned to read that logic and work with it rather than against it. The third-floor dormitory became the room that most interested her, that long open space with its hooks and its low windows, and she began to understand it as the heart of what Harriet had run, a place that had never asked how much money you had before it let you in. She built a shelf in the kitchen. She stocked it. She did not put a sign on it. She let Dot know, and Dot knew exactly what to do with the information. The auction result became public through the county property records before Ada had decided what to say about it. A reporter who had been following the inn's story, a 22-year-old buying a derelict Stagecoach property for $10, was notable enough on its own, put the pieces together, and ran a piece in the regional paper. It was picked up by a state wire service, and then a national features syndicate. The story had the quality of things that spread because they are true and strange and complete in a satisfying way. A root cellar, a 100-year-old letter, a woman who had planned for a centennial she would never see, and another woman who had shown up just in time. Ada used the auction proceeds with the same care she had kept in her notebook for 2 years. The roof first, the most urgent and the most expensive. Then the electrical system, which had not been updated since the 1970s. Then the plumbing. She did the interior work herself, room by room, contracting out what she could not legally do, and doing everything adjacent with her own hands, learning as she went. She opened the inn to its first guests on a Saturday in June of the following year. 3 rooms, bed and breakfast, a rate she had calculated to be honest and viable. She was in the kitchen at 6 every morning. By 7 there was coffee on and something warm on the stove. By 7:30 the dining room door was open. Seth called in January. He had seen the newspaper piece. His voice had the particular note of someone offering a compliment that is also a quiet claim, that he had always known she would do something remarkable. Ada listened to him finish. She thanked him and said she hoped he was well and hung up, and did not think about him again that evening. Nadine she heard about from Dot. Dot had been at the hardware store on a Tuesday in August, when Lou mentioned that a woman he didn't recognize, newer vehicle, not from the valley, had slowed to a stop in front of the inn and sat there for a while looking at it. The porch freshly repaired, the plywood gone from the windows, the brass hardware on the door polished, the sign, Garnet Fork Inn, EST, 1857, open. The woman had sat there for a minute, and then driven on. Lou described her. Dot had a view about who that was, and she shared it with Ada in the careful way of someone handing over something fragile. Ada thought about it for a moment. She thought about a blue ceramic mug in 3 pieces at the bottom of a cardboard box. She thought about a hotel interview she had prepared for and never heard back from. She thought about the particular cold efficiency of a woman sorting through someone else's belongings with the air of someone completing a task she has been looking forward to. Then, she went to start the dinner. She had a roof that she had put there herself, and a kitchen that smelled of something warm every morning, and a shelf in the back that was never empty, and a door that was open. She had the work in front of her in the valley outside, and Harriet's letter in the wooden box on the innkeeper's desk, which she read sometimes in the evening when she wanted to remember why she was doing this, and to whom she felt accountable. She turned 23 that autumn. Dot and Lou and Sylvie sat at the dining room table, and she cooked, and it was the first birthday she had ever spent in a place that was genuinely hers, and she did not make a speech about it, because she did not need to. The inn was full that weekend. She was in the kitchen before dawn. She had 5 rooms open by the following spring and a wait list for October, when the leaves came in on the ridge above the valley and the road through Garnet Fork filled with people looking for somewhere to stop that felt like something real. She had become, without quite planning for it in these terms, the place people stopped. In November, she restocked the shelf and turned the side door latch to unlocked during daylight hours. She had not announced this. She did not need to. You take care of a place, and it teaches you what it needs. She had learned this from a woman she would never meet, who had written it down in the root cellar in 1912, and trusted that the right person would eventually come down the stairs and find it. The inn is only as good as its welcome. She had been thrown out of a farmhouse in the rain with $10 and a broken mug and a notebook full of plans. She had found, at the bottom of a stone staircase in the foothills of Garnet Fork, proof that someone had already believed in this place, and in the person who would come for it, for over 100 years. That Harriet Vance had not known her name, and had loved her anyway, had laid up provision for her, had written out the lesson in clear, deliberate letters, had simply waited. The door had been open all along. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll subscribe. It keeps these coming, and it means more than you might expect. And I'd love to know, was there ever something from the past, a letter, a photograph, something left behind that told you something you needed to hear? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next one.